The movie begins with a flashback, and we see a young girl named Madeline Swan who is taking care of her ailing mother. Suddenly, she sees a strange masked man approaching their house. Madeline gets scared of him, so she tries to lock the house, takes the gun from the kitchen cabinet and hides under her bed. The man enters the house and introduces himself as Safin. He inquires to Madeline's mother about her husband, Mr. White, and tells her that he murdered his entire family. Upon receiving no answer from her, he shoots her. This is when young Madeline witnesses Safin in a failed attempt to murder her father, Mr. White. Then, Safin begins searching for Madeline, but when he gets near her, she shoots him and drags him out of the house, thinking that he is deceased. But to her surprise, Safin is still alive. Seeing him alive, Madeline flees onto a nearby frozen lake and falls through the ice. Safin follows her, and sees that Madeline is stuck under the frozen ice, but even though he was sent to eliminate her, he finds that he can't just watch the girl perish under the ice in such a horrific way. So, he shoots at it, breaking open the surface for her to swim up, and rescues her. The scene shifts back to the present, and we see Madeline all grown up, living in a romantic relationship with James Bond in Matera. We see Madeline swimming in the warm waters of Matera, and although both of them seem happy together, Madeline realizes that Bond still has lingering thoughts about his ex-lover, Vesper Lynd. So, she tells him to let her go. Bond decides to visit her grave, as she is buried close to them in Matera, and bid a final farewell so that he can move on with his life. Meanwhile, Madeline does the same with her memory of Safin, by writing "Masked Man" on a piece of paper in French and then burning it. The next morning, Bond visits Vesper's grave, and he also has a piece of paper ready to burn, with "Forgive me" written on it. Suddenly, he notices a Spectre calling card nearby. He picks it up, and a few seconds later, the tomb explodes. Spectre assassins ambush Bond, but he quickly recovers and runs away. He races back to his hotel room on a motorcycle as the assassins follow him. He gets to Madeline, but accuses her of setting him up, since the assassins wouldn't know where to find him without her informing them. Then, he takes her in his Aston Martin, embarking on a high-speed chase followed by the ruthless assassin. They get surrounded in a plaza, and Madeline begs him to make a move, but he doesn't, and lets them shoot his car. But when he realizes that she is telling the truth, he activates the machine gun and eradicates all of them. Though Bond and Madeline overcome the assassins, Bond believes that Madeline has betrayed him, despite her pleas, and leaves her. We are totally aware of Bond's aversive nature toward betrayal and lies, especially after what happened between him and Vesper. 5 years later, another team of assassins break into the MI6 lab. During this mission, MI6 scientist Valdo Obruchev is kidnapped. Obruchev has developed Project Heracles, a bioweapon containing nanobots that infect like a virus upon touch, and are coded to an individual's specific DNA, rendering it lethal to the target but harmless to others. Meanwhile, Bond has retired from MI6 to live in Jamaica, where he is contacted by CIA agent Felix Leiter with his colleague, Logan Ash. They go to a nightclub, where Leiter asks for his help in tracking down Obruchev, but Bond declines, because he thinks that he has come far from the secret agent life and does not trust anyone. He also tells Leiter that he has a suspicious feeling about Logan. On his way back, he realizes that his car has broken down. Then, he is approached by a woman named Nomi on a motorcycle, and she offers him a ride back home. When they reach his home, Nomi takes off her cover, and tells him that she is not only an agent at MI6, but also the new 007. Being informed by Nomi about Project Heracles, and the fact that Spectre agents are involved in it, Bond subsequently agrees to help Leiter. Back in the MI6, we see the leader of the Spectre agents named Blofeld. He is held as a prisoner there and everyone believes that he is crazy. In the next scene, Bond goes to Cuba and meets a CIA agent named Paloma, who is allied with Leiter. Bond and Paloma infiltrate a Spectre meeting for Blofeld's birthday to retrieve Obruchev. Meanwhile, Obruchev is being forced to set up Heracles in the facility, but he switches the vial from the device. Once Bond and Paloma realize that Blofeld is up to something, the entire focus of the party is turned to Bond's presence. Blofeld, who is using a disembodied, bionic eye, to lead the meeting while still being imprisoned in MI6, orders his members to eliminate Bond with the nanobots. But little does he know that Obruchev is actually working for Safin, and subtly changed the target of the virus to anybody associated with Spectre. Suddenly, Spectre agents start to grow boils on their faces and perish one by one, while Bond and Paloma remain unaffected. So, the nanobots murder all the Spectre members, as Obruchev had reprogrammed them to do so on Safin's orders. After they're all gone, Bond manages to outwit Nomi and escape with Obruchev, taking him back to the CIA. On their way back, Bond interrogates Obruchev about Heracles and why it specifically did not affect him. After hearing this, Ash gets a bit nervous, surprisingly, and tells Obruchev to stop talking, like he is trying to hide something. Then, Obruchev tells Bond that killing the Spectre agents was always the plan, so, during the poisoning he switched the DNA sample of Bond with the Spectre agent. He also tells him that it was M who helped him create the virus. At the mention of his former friend and mentor, Bond gets a bit curious, and asks him how Blofeld knew of his presence at the party. At this point, he gets the realization that it was Ash who leaked the information. Ash is working as a double agent with Obruchev. They get into a fight, and during the struggle, Ash shoots Leiter and gets away with Obruchev. Ash and Obruchev escape on a plane, and Ash sets an explosive off in the boat they were stationed on. As the ship sinks, Leiter forces Bond to stop trying to save him, and he drowns. After that, Bond regretfully manages to escape, leaving his friend behind, and heads back to London to work out what the hell is going on. Back at the MI6 lab, Bond meets with M and asks him to let him see Blofeld. But M tells him that Blofeld is the last surviving member of the Spectre gang, so he cannot let Bond see him. Then, Bond inquires him about Heracles, and asks him why risk the lives of so many people by creating a weapon that can destroy everyone. M gets mad at Bond for blaming him and asks him to get out of his office. On his way out, he sees Penny, and she tells him that she will help him despite M's refusal. That night, they go to Q's house, and we see him preparing dinner for his boyfriend. They ask Q to let them see the files they recovered, and when they do, they discover files related to Spectre targets, except for Blofeld. They also find thousands of other files of the targets, with their DNA samples all around the world. Then, Bond asks Q to arrange a meeting for him with Blofeld, but he tells him that only one person in the world has access to him. The scene shifts to Madeline, who is now working as a psychiatrist. As she goes to her office, she sees Safin sitting there, but she does not recognize him until he presents her with his broken mask. After seeing the mask, she gets very scared of him, as flashbacks of her childhood reappear in her mind. Safin then tells her that he needs her for something. Meanwhile, Bond has a meeting with the entire MI6 team to be reinstated as a 00 agent. Then, they review a file of a Spectre agent's funeral, and find out that 5 family members who came into contact with him are now deceased from having acquired the Heracles poisoning. They realize that Heracles has become more harmful than it was intended to be, as now it has been weaponized, using nanobots to go after not only the targets but also anyone related to them. Bond eventually persuades M to let him see Blofeld, who is now the last remaining Spectre member after the mass murder at the party. But it leads to an awkward reunion between Madeline and Bond. It's the first time Bond has seen her since they split up in the pre-title sequence, where he accused Madeline of leading Spectre to him. He tries to shake hands with her, but she declines, and as soon as Blofeld is brought to them, she gets very nervous. She tries to leave, but Bond grabs her by her wrist. Then, she pulls away from him quickly and leaves. Then, we see Bond talking to Blofeld, who mocks him and tells him that he deliberately set up an attack at Vesper's tomb to make him think that it was Madeline. This makes Bond very angry, as he realizes that Madeline had been faithful to him all along, but Blofeld keeps provoking him, to the point that he physically attacks the prisoner. Tanner intervenes and stops Bond, but they see that Blofeld has been poisoned to death by Bond's touch. Bond realizes that he has been infected with Heracles by Madeline. It is revealed that the poison Madeline sprayed onto her wrist transferred to Bond when he grabbed her, and this was intended to bring about Blofeld's end. So, it's obvious that Madeline was having second thoughts when she tried to leave before Bond touched her and when she refused the handshake. Meanwhile, Madeline flees her apartment, and nobody can find her. But Bond tracks her down to her childhood home in Norway. There, he learns that Madeline has a 5-year-old daughter named Mathilde, whom she claims is not his. After putting her daughter to sleep, Madeline confesses to Bond that Safin's parents were murdered by Madeline's father on Blofeld's orders when Safin was a boy, prompting him to seek revenge on Blofeld and Spectre. She also informs him about an island that Safin's family had, and he is currently running his operations there. Bond gives the information to Q, and asks him to locate Safin. Q finds that the island is located between Japan and Russia. On the other hand, despite having succeeded in murdering Blofeld and destroying Spectre, Safin continues his rampage as he, Ash, and their men are on their way to capture Bond, Madeline, and Mathilde. Though Bond manages to eliminate Ash and several of Safin's men, Safin still captures Madeline and Mathilde. Bond then rejoins with MI6, and Nomi reluctantly relinquishes the 007 title to Bond. Now with the blessing of M, Bond teams up with Nomi, and they locate Safin in a Second World War base on an island. They infiltrate Safin's headquarters and learn that Safin has converted the base into a nanobot factory, where he has had Obruchev create millions of nanobots, so that he can unleash them globally to murder millions of people and establish a new world order for himself. Nomi and Bond plan to capture Obruchev, save Madeline and Mathilde, and blow the place up. Bond shoots many of Safin's men, while Nomi deals with Obruchev by pushing him into a vat of nanobots. Then, Safin explains to Bond that he's turning the virus on the world, because people want oblivion, and they don't want free will. Bond doesn't agree, of course, but since Safin is holding Mathilde hostage, he can't do anything. Bond gets to his knees and tells Safin not to hurt her. Then, he finally makes a move and takes out a concealed pistol, shooting Safin's guards, but Safin escapes with Mathilde. Later on, they find Mathilde in the base, and Safin lets her go when she bites him. She hides until Madeline finds her. After rescuing Madeline and Mathilde, Bond has them escape with Nomi from the island, while he stays behind to open the island's silo doors, which would enable a missile strike from the nearby HMS Dragon to destroy the nanobots. Bond fights off the remaining Safin henchmen and manages to open the blast doors, but just when he's about to leave, they close again. Safin shoots Bond on his way back to open them, and during the resulting fight, Safin infects Bond by breaking a vial of the virus on his cheek. This isn't any ordinary strain though, it's programmed with Madeline and Mathilde's DNA, so if Bond ever touches them again, he'll murder them. Bond shoots Safin and goes to open the blast doors as the Navy airstrike closes in. Then, he contacts Q, and has Nomi put Madeline on the line for him. Here they share a final moment together, and reaffirm their love for each other. Madeline then confirms to him that Mathilde is his daughter. Q tries to force Bond to leave, but since Heracles can't be removed, Bond chooses the heroic sacrifice route to save Madeline and Mathilde. So, despite Q's pleas to get out of there, Bond decides to sacrifice himself because he knows that there is no point in saving himself, as he does not want to put Madeline and his daughter in danger. So, he'd rather die than go through the rest of his life without ever being able to hold his daughter or the woman he loves. Then, Bond accepts his fate as the missiles hit the island, destroying the nanobot factory. We don't technically see Bond's body, but Q's monitor confirms that Bond is gone, as the smart blood put in Bond shows no signs of life. In the final moments of No Time to Die, we see M, Q, Nomi, Moneypenny, and Tanner raise a glass to Bond's memory. M reads out a quote by Jack London, which was actually previously used in the You Only Live Twice novel, when Bond was assumed to be deceased, and his obituary contained the same quote. We then see Madeline and Mathilde on a road trip, as she goes to tell her a story about a man called Bond, James Bond.